What is key in RDBMS? So key concepts has an important role in relational database management system. This technique is used for identifying the unique rows from table and also help to establish relationship among the tables. The name itself, key, is quite mysterious, right? Why this is named as key? But if you can think properly, you can understand making a relationship between two tables is basically connecting them. So key terms is used to make those tables, like those tables have their own relationship. And from using those relationship, we can retrieve our data, right? And that makes our life so easy. I will show you how can you actually make a big data set into converting them into RDBMS and how it's going to help you to retrieve your data, to manipulate your data, right? To get the information from those huge numbers of data. Now we will have a look at the types of key we have in RDBMS. So we have primary key, we have super key, candidate key, alternate key, composite key, and foreign key. So totally we have 6 types of key. Now we will have a look at each of them differently and particularly, and we will take an example for each of them and we will try to understand how these key concepts are working under this RDBMS. Now we will start with primary key. So basically, primary key concepts is a technique to classify unique tables or rows in a table, right? So give me an example with that. So if you go for using a primary key, it will help you to make sure that your data, whatever data you have in your database, they are quietly unique, right? So for the each and every primary key, that should be unique values, right? If you are going to give a repeated value for a primary key, that is not gonna take your data. So that time it is making sure that whatever the data you have in your data set, they are unique. There is no repeated data in your data set. And that's how it makes your data set more constructed and more structured, right? Now let's have a look at some of the keys of primary key. So primary key does not contain null value. Value should be unique. And primary keys are not always to be single attribute or column. And it can be also be a set of more than one attributes or column. But what are the attributes we stand for? So if you look at the table, so basically attributes are the column name. So whenever you are trying to work with DBMS, there are some words or some keywords will come into your way which maybe make you confused. So I will try to cover all those things as well. So when it comes to attributes, these attributes are basically your column name, right? Now you can see in the table we have 3 columns. We have basically 3 attributes. One is student ID, second one is name, and third one is age. If you look at the table more closely, you can see the name can be repeated, right? Age can be same for 2 persons. But what cannot be same for a 2 person? What can make your data more unique? So in that case, student ID cannot be same. So for that, we are going to take student ID as a primary key, right? So whenever you are going to use primary key concepts for your data set, you have to make sure that which column making your data more unique, right? For the case of student ID, it's not going to be same for any student. It's always be different for different students, right? So this column can be your primary key. Or if you want to make primary key using 2 columns or 2 attributes like maybe student ID and name, that can also be done using the 2 columns, right? So these are the basic concepts. How can you use primary key for your table and make your data more constructed and more structured. Now comes the second concepts of super key. But what is super key? A super key is a set of one or more columns or attributes to uniquely classify rows in a table. But how we are going to do that? So super key is a superset of candidate key. In the next part, we will have a look at what is candidate key, right? So in the example, you can see that student ID and student name. Okay, so already we know student ID is something that uniquely you can use, right? So that can be your primary key. But in the case of name and student ID, again that will make sure your data is not redundant or your data is not duplicate. So you can combine both of them, that student ID and name, and you can make a super key. Okay, so in the student table, student ID and name, the name of two students can be same, but their student ID cannot be same. So this combination can also be a key of super key, right? Now we will have a look at what is candidate key. So candidate key is also a set of one or more columns or attributes to uniquely classify rows in a table. Now you guys will start thinking that what's the difference between super key and the candidate key, right? So let me give you an example for that. The all remaining attributes or columns except for the primary key are considered as a candidate key. The candidate keys are also as strong as the primary key, right? So if you look at the table, we have 4 attributes or 4 column name. So in this case, we can say student ID will be unique, passport number is also unique, and license number will also be unique, right? So in that case, except student ID, your passport number and license number also be a part of candidate key, right? So this is also unique. So you can use them as a candidate key. Now let's have a look at what's the difference between super key and candidate key. So in the super key, all the candidates keys are super keys. But when comes the candidate keys are taken from super keys, right? So all the super keys cannot be a candidate key, but all the candidate keys should be super key. So this is the catch over here. You need to understand. So you can say all the super key are not candidate key, but any super key can be called as candidate key, right? So combination of various super keys make the criteria to choose the candidate keys, whereas combination of various candidate keys make the criteria to choose the primary keys. So these are the catch between super key and the candidate key. In a table, number of super keys are always greater than number of candidate keys. And also in the table, number of super keys are always less than the number of candidate keys, right? Now let's have a look at the super keys attribute can contain null values, whereas candidate keys attributes can also contain null values. So both of the cases, this is same, right? Now we will have a look at what is alternate key. So alternate key is out of all the candidate keys, only one gets selected for primary key, and rest keys are known as alternate or secondary keys, right? So let's have a look at what actually I want to mean by alternate key. So you can see we have candidate key like student ID, passport number and license number. So we take student ID as a primary key. But in the case of passport number and license number, this is also a candidate key, but this is also known as alternate key. Now let's have a look at what is composite key. So composite key consists of greater than one attribute to uniquely classify rows or records and tuple in a table, right? So none of the column can perform as a primary key. So the combination of key can be considered as a composite key, right? So these are the concepts we already know. Now we will look at the last concept. What is foreign key? So basically in the real scenario, we use 2 keys mostly. The 2 keys is primary key and foreign key. We also use the other keys as well, but for the most of the cases, we go for using primary key and foreign key. So what is foreign key? Foreign keys are the columns of a table which refers to the primary key or another table, and basically they act as a cross reference between tables, right? So whenever you are going to use a table relation, that time we use foreign key. So if you can look at, we have 2 tables over here. One is student table and second one is course table. So in the student table, we have attributes like student ID, name, passport number and license number. But in the case of course table, we have student ID and course ID. Now, how we are going to relate them, right? So you can see one attribute is common over here. So one attribute, that is student ID, is common in student table and student ID is also common in course table, right? So we can say in the student table, student ID is the primary key, that we all know. So whenever it comes to the student ID in course table, that time we can say student ID is a foreign key, right? So basically it is act as a cross reference between the tables. So using student ID, you can connect this two table. So this is how foreign key concepts works. We will understand this concept more deeply whenever we are going to use our demo part. That time I will show you how can you actually use foreign key concepts to join two tables, right? We will also look how can you make those relation between two tables.